Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy food so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get even a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Good morning. This is Pastor Steve Mapp, and I am so glad that you've taken time to join with us this morning on Monday, May the 3rd, for our devotion. We're continuing in the Red Letter Challenge, the series of devotionals over the 40 days after Easter. And this week, we're focusing our attention, if you will, on the call that we have as Christians to be givers. And it follows the week study we did on being servants, because I think those two are intricately tied together, serving and giving. Now this morning, the passage that I read comes from John's Gospel. And if you read the Red Letter Challenge for today, Pastor Zach tells the story of the feeding of the 5,000, but he's using the story from another gospel. I chose John's Gospel this morning to tell that same story because there's something important that I think we often lose focus on. The passage that we're dealing with here, we often focus our attention on the need for the disciples to serve the people, to not send them away, but to find a way to help and to serve. And indeed, that's true. We need to be doing that as followers of Jesus. But as I read this passage this morning, I really am fascinated with something that we don't talk much about, and that's the little boy. Now, there was a great number of folk that had come. Now, it says 5,000 men. That does not include the women and children that would be along there. And yet it seems that only one little boy has come with any food at all. It may be likely that his mom packed his lunch and told him that this would be good for you. It's going to be a long day and you may need this to eat. And so she packed a lunch for him. And yet this little boy, I can only imagine the discussion between what he was thinking when the disciples came to him and said, "The master has need of these 5 barley loaves and fish. Would you give them?" And I think about this little boy, and he doesn't offer any excuses. He just gives it freely. He hands it over. And I think it's because he saw Jesus. He saw Jesus' concern for all of these people and that they were hungry. And he wanted to somehow help. And so he gave it all to Jesus with, I think, the full faith that Jesus would take what he had and make it all good. And indeed, the story as we read it, exactly that happens. Jesus takes the 5 barley loaves and the 2 fish, and he gives thanks to God for them. He breaks them and distributes them to the crowd. And there is, in essence, a ton of food left over. I can only imagine what was going through that little boy's mind as he saw those 5 barley loaves and 2 fish turn into a feast that fed thousands and thousands and thousands. And I got to thinking about that this morning. And when it comes to our following Jesus and the call for us to give, to me, the first part of that, the first ingredient to me being a faithful giver is to have the desire to give, to have, in essence, a generous heart that believes that whatever I have, in this case, the little boy's 5 loaves and 2 fishes, can do so much more if we just offer it, if we just put it in God's hands. It's amazing to me how much joy comes from that. Can you imagine the joy in this little boy when what he'd given turned out to be so much? He didn't ask for anything back. Didn't even expect anything back. He got to eat his fill. And still there was more left over. And it all started with the generous heart, the generosity of his heart. And not thinking in terms of scarcity, of limited resources, but taking what he had, giving it to Jesus, and let Jesus take it and do so much more with it. I can only imagine this, that this little boy goes home and his mother asks him how the day went. Can you imagine the story that this little boy had told his mother? When she packed his lunch, she meant it to be totally for him. But instead, it turned out to be for him and for all the others and so much more. So as we think about following Jesus and the call for generosity, I think we need to check the heart and the desire in the giving. The Apostle Paul tells us that the Lord loves a cheerful giver. And that's what this little fellow was on this particular day, a cheerful giver. And look what happened. I think if we can give whatever it is that we have, whatever skills and abilities and treasures that God has allowed us to have, if we can give it freely, no conditions, just give it freely to God's purposes, oh, the joy that comes from that is simply amazing. Now, there's a lot to consider in this desire to give like Jesus. But for today, for me, I really wanted to focus on the generosity of heart that's needed whenever we give. God sees into our heart. He knows our motivation. If we can give freely without expectation, knowing that what we give to God, He will do miracles with. Wow, what a powerful incentive for us to give. Not just our treasures, but our talents, our time. These are precious resources. Shouldn't we allow God to have use of them first? That's what this little boy thought. Hey, thanks for being with us this morning. So grateful for your time. And I do hope that you're able to enjoy the Red Letter Challenge along with us at Winfrey. I pray for your safety. I pray for your blessings. And I pray that as you walk away from the devotional today, that during the day, you and I, think about the generosity that's in our hearts, the motives that we have in using the resources that God gives us. Thanks for joining in. God bless you. I'll see you again soon.